let's look at our first example. Here, the coefficient of our square term a is not 1, it is actually 2. So if a is greater than 1, what do we need to do? We need to divide by a, divide everything by a after we have isolated the constant. So first we're going to isolate the constant. In other words, we subtract 26 on both sides in order to get 2x squared minus 12x is equal to negative 26. Now let's divide each term by 2. This will give us x squared minus 6x is equal to negative 13. And as you can tell, I have already left room here for our quantity b divided by 2 squared, which we now need to add. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and that squared is 9. So we are adding 9 on both sides. This will complete our trinomial on the left, which we now can go ahead and factor since it's a perfect square trinomial, and turns into the quantity of x minus 3 squared. And we're also going to simplify our right side. Negative 13 plus 9 is equal to negative 4. In our next step, we're now going to solve that equation by first taking the square root of both sides. On the left, we get x minus 3. Let's go to the left. Uh-oh, we see we have to square root of a negative number. So in the past, we always stopped here because we couldn't do the math. Now we have learned about complex numbers, and we can go right ahead and do this. First of all, we're going to have a positive and a negative solution. We know that much. And we are going to take our negative 1 out of our number, and remember that that is the square root of I squared. And we also have then left the square root of 4. And as we know, the square root of I squared is I, and the square root of 4 is 2. So we got positive and negative 2I as the solution of the square root. Now the last thing we need to do is we need to add 3 to both sides of the equation, and our solutions are x is equal to 3 plus or minus 2I. This solution is a complex number, or actually these two solutions are complex numbers, and what that tells us is that this graph will not cross the x-axis. We have no real solutions. That means we have no x-intercepts, no zeros. Let's go to the next example. This next example will tell us how to deal with fractions. Okay, there's nothing to worry about. Just do the math all the way through. But first we need to always isolate our constant, and in this case also then afterwards divide by a, because a is 2. Divide, and now we got x squared minus 5x, don't forget to leave some room, is equal to 2. Let's add our b half squared. Negative 5 divided by 2. Don't turn it into a decimal. That's going to just make it much more complicated. Just leave it as a fraction. We got negative 5 halves. And negative 5 halves squared. Remember, we need to square both the numerator and the denominator. And we get 25 over 4, 25 quarters. Of course, it's positive. Square of any number is always positive. And here are our completed trinomials. Both sides of the equation are completed by the 25/4. Let's go ahead and factor our left side. We get the quantity of x minus 5/2 squared. And we want to simplify our right side. So for that, we're going to do a little bit of math on the side here. We got 2 plus 25/4. Remember, when we want to add fractions, we need the same denominator. Our 2 for now has a denominator of 1. The common denominator would be 4, so we multiply our first fraction by 4, both in the numerator and denominator, and we get 8/4 plus 25/4, and that is actually 33/4, which is what we're going to put on the right side of our equation. Now we're going to solve our equation by taking the square root of both sides. And on the left, we just simply get x minus 5/2. Remember, the two operations cancel each other out, and we get plus or minus the square root of 33/4. Now let's talk about that number for a little bit here. The square root of 33/4 is the same as saying the square root of 33 over the square root of 4. And that's a good thing because we can simplify at least our denominator. We cannot do anything to the numerator, but we can simplify at least our denominator because, as we know, the square root of 4 is 2. Which means that x minus 5/2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 33 divided by 2. Adding 5/2 to both sides of the equation, we get x is equal to 5/2 plus or minus the square root of 33/2. And since these two fractions have the same denominator, we could also write that this is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 33 and the entire thing divided by 2. All right, here's our answer, you guys. Great job, and I will see you in class.